What's going on, everybody? My name is Noel. You can follow me over at Noise by Noel. Welcome to the first episode of a podcast that we don't really know the name of just yet, but I got my man Caleb Nguyen with me, one of my guys, been my guy for a couple years now. I mean, you can talk about really any sport with him. His knowledge is the best in the game. Caleb, how are you doing today, my guy?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. What about you, bro?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm pretty hyped to talk about some of the hottest topics in the NBA right now. I mean, Caleb, what's probably like the number one basketball thing on your mind these days? Like, what do you feel is like craziest thing you've seen in the NBA recently?
It's a pretty good question. Honestly, for me, I think it's some of these young teams that have been like super high up in the standings. Specifically for me, both Orlando and OKC have really caught my eye this season. From two teams that I think a lot of analysts out there they're expecting simply like a play-in spot, maybe like a 7 or 8 seed, but both of them have been top half of the standings for a pretty good while now. Now that we've gotten over a quarter of the season.
I mean, yeah. I mean, especially looking at OKC, I feel like that was a team that we all watched last year with Shea being in the top five MVP voting. With you got guys like J Dub, you got Josh Giddey. Regardless of what's going on right now, just keeping it strictly basketball. All
Mhm.
those dudes, everybody's looking at is like, wow, like these guys. They have a special group. They drafted most of them. They kind of had one of the most successful rebuilds that we've seen in a while, and now they're the second in the Western Conference right now. They took down the Memphis Grizzlies today, 116-97, the last game before John Morant returns. They hold a 17-8 record. And as far as the NBA, they are fifth in points per game. They're second in blocks, third in field goal percentage, and fifth in 3-point percentage. So they're pretty dominant on both ends of the floor. Other than Shea, who are you most impressed with on that team right now, Caleb?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be Chet. We all expected him. At least a lot of people. Some people were concerned with the size. Maybe he was too skinny to play, kind of like Wemby this year. But he's proven to be a defensive monster and one of their best shooters. Like such a key cog. He does literally everything for them. He can take it off the dribble. He's been rebounding at a really good rate. And what I'm most impressed about is his defense. He had 9 blocks the other night against the Denver Nuggets, and going up against Jokic and company. That's the defending champions, and that's pretty hard to do. And you got Isaiah Joe as well. He's a really good 3-point shooter, and he's actually been closing a couple games for them alongside, another impressive rookie for them, Cason Wallace. Really high efficiency at the guard spot, and he's kind of made Josh Giddey sort of obsolete in, their closing lineup. It'll be interesting to see what they do, considering, Sam Presti has like that treasure trove of draft picks and a lot of interesting trade topics are still on the market. Maybe a Zach LaVine, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. So, we'll see what happens. But, with or without Giddy, I think, they've just got a really solid core and they're ahead of schedule. They're not even on time. They are way ahead of schedule right now. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, you reposted that meme the other day where it was the mom made pizza rolls. And I feel like that's just the whole vibe of that team right now. It's like they're all having a great time. Chet
They're all
was
having
really
fun.
the guy that they needed to come in and kind of pull them into that top of the playoff race, top of the Western Conference. And I mean, you love to see it. Like you were saying, everybody had a lot of stuff to say about Chet. You saw how he went out in his college career with Gonzaga, but
Mhm.
it's a whole different ballgame once you get to the NBA. I saw him playing in the summer league before he got hurt over in the Pro Am games his rookie year. I knew that dude was going to be special in the NBA. Just the impact he had, and every time that he has a big game, he always wants his teammates with him in the post-game pressers. That's beautiful. You love to see it. And like you were saying, he has had at least 2 blocks over the last 7 games. He's on an insane stretch, averaging 17 points. Is he your favorite for the rookie of the year right now?
If you consider, I think, win totals into consideration, I mean, Wemby, he's been great. Don't get me wrong. Maybe efficiency is a bit down, but that's also because he's playing with not the best set of teammates that don't necessarily get on the ball, other than Trey Jones. Pop. I never want to discredit Pop or get discouraged by his coaching style, but maybe playing Jeremy Sohan at the one, maybe not the best strategy. I understand they got a long way to go and it's a rebuild process, so you know it's neither here nor there. But I think for the impact that he's had this year on winning compared to where the Thunder were as a low playing team last year to all the way up to the 2 seed in a very competitive Western Conference, I think it's got to be Chad right now. I think it definitely has to be.
Yeah, there you have it. I mean, like it's been a really interesting rookie class. You have guys like Scoot Henderson not really
Mhm.
playing up to par. You have Brandon Miller who's fitting in nicely with the Hornets team. That it's sad to say because LaMelo was playing like a beast. They were finally kind of starting to get a good groove. LaMelo gets hurt. Terry Rozier comes back, and it's all over the place now. But just like you, I also think that Chet is the favorite right now. He was my pick at the beginning of the year, so I'm really excited to see how he closes out. The Thunder potentially go on a playoff run, upset a couple teams on route, and like you said, they're ahead of schedule. Moving on to the Orlando Magic. This one was pretty crazy. Like the way they're
Yeah.
playing right now, because well, everybody kind of had stuff to say about them the last couple of years. What's your immediate reactions how they've been performing over the past couple of weeks?
Well, the past couple weeks, I think they've sort of tailed off a bit from their hot stretch. I remember they were as high as 2 earlier in the season. They've dropped a couple games by the looks of it. They've lost their last 2, 6-4 in their last 10. But I think overall, you can say this is a very successful season for them still. I think it's years worth of sort of like very smart draft picks and shrewd moves paying off in spades. They had that core of, DJ Augustine, Terrence Ross, and Nikola Vucevic. They had back-to-back 8 seeds in 2020 and 2019. And, they bowed out in the playoffs early and they decided, it was time to pull the plug. They traded Vucevic to the Chicago Bulls. They ended up getting Wendell Carter Jr. He's been hurt for a little bit, but with that, the draft pick that they also got turned into Franz Wagner. And him and Paolo Banchero, after they won the lottery in 2021 in that same class as Chet, they've been absolutely dominant in the front court. You pair that with a lot of other young talent like Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, who's a defensive monster, mind you, out of Gonzaga as well. Got a personal vendetta with him for how he did my UCLA Bruins.
That was insane. That was insane.
But, all credit to him as a pro now. He's a defensive monster. He will deflect any pass. He's an absolute bulldog on that end of the floor. And they just have a lot of really nice pieces, and it's all really coming together. They have a really tight-knit group, and yeah, I mean, I've been very impressed that, they're top half of the Eastern Conference, also very competitive.
Facts. I mean, when you look at all around their team, they're just really well structured. And I feel like even though you see Banchero and you see Franz Wagner getting a lot of the praise, 6 players are averaging above double digits. And Banchero specifically, he has taken a leap at the 3-point line. Even though he's only attempting 1.3 attempts per game, he's shooting 38% from beyond the arc. And that was the big rep that everybody had for him after, a really good rookie year. I believe he almost went unanimous for Rookie of the Year. Almost. There was 1 or 2 votes for another player, but
yeah, I think J-Dub made a late push at the end of the
did.
season there because he had a really good rookie year too. Yeah. But yeah, I think Paolo, because his shooting splits definitely tailed off in February and March. I know, like I saw a stat where he was shooting like under 20% from 3.
It was rough for a little bit.
A little bit brutal. But inside the arc, his scoring has been very, very key for them. And Franz Wagner, he's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Like he could, or I guess in his case, a German Army knife, because he can really do just about anything. Shooting threes, pretty good defensively, very skilled passer and a willing scorer too. So again, I think like the Thunder we talked about, I think they're definitely ahead of schedule, and home court in the playoffs is definitely possible for them. Keeping this up.
Yeah, 100%. And I was listening to the MPJ podcast the other day. He had Aaron Gordon on as a guest. That was the guy that they thought was going to be something for them, hopefully potentially be the number 1 option at some point. Mm-hmm. He never quite got the shot creation or deep shooting or do that. And now he's in a really good situation in Denver. But one thing that he did talk about was the culture. He said when he was there, that guys were just okay with showing up, putting in the work they needed to, and leaving. There wasn't that sense of like needing to win games. There wasn't that sense of putting in the extra hours to really get above the top. He said living in Orlando, people don't realize it, but it's a beautiful city. There's all kinds of stuff to do. He said dudes were showing up in their Rolls Royces, their Lambos, getting up a couple shots, and just leaving afterwards. So it looks like the culture has changed a lot ever since he was traded. They have these new pieces, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to accomplish this season and moving forward. But with these young teams performing very well, we also have to talk about some young teams that aren't necessarily living up to expectations or performing. And you got to look at the Detroit Pistons first off. 24-game losing streak after today. Most recently lost to the Atlanta Hawks, despite Cade Cunningham dropping a career high of 43 points. Caleb, what do you think about the Pistons right now?
Yeah, it's just, what other word to describe them other than just a mess, really? And I believe they started the season out 2-1, and they haven't won a game since.
Yep.
I've been looking at stats, and like more recently, the Texas Rangers have won a game in their season before the Pistons have. And
that is insane stat right there.
Their season ended in early November, mind you.
That is insane.
Like from the World Series. And we're talking completely different sports. I think another like insane stat to see, I think the Detroit Lions have won more in the calendar year of 2023 than the Pistons have. So like coming off of last season, you have like one of the worst records in the NBA. You don't win the lottery. You miss out on Wemby. That's about enough, Cade got hurt. It was pretty much a lost season, but people thought at the start of the season, okay, you have Cade, you have Jalen Duren, you got Isaiah Stewart. Like, you have some decent pieces there. You got a veteran presence in Bogdanovich who, provides some 3-point shooting and, mentorship, but it's just all gone downhill. I know Bojan was injured for a lot of the season, but like you said, even with Cade dropping 41 tonight, it just wasn't enough. And like, now you might be looking at going into 2024 without getting a win since November. Like, they're on pace to set one of like the worst records in NBA history. And when you talk about the process Sixers, the 2012 Bobcats who missed out on AD back then for Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, when does it end? Like, it's not like you're even tanking for a generational prospect at this point either. Although we don't know how Cooper Flagg or Ron Holland or Matas Buzelis are going to end up. There's just no structure. It's just Monty Williams. You paid him a bag to coach, and it doesn't really seem like he's all too interested or motivated either. And like, who could blame him after dropping the finals to both Giannis and bowing out in the second round in 2 straight years? But yeah, it's like super concerning for me. And just overall, like I mentioned before at the start, just a mess.
Yeah, I think that definitely is the best way to put it. It sucks too because you look at the talent they have. You look at someone like a Cade Cunningham, who was a lottery pick, who was, he's doing his part. He's averaging above 20 points. He's trying to get his teammates involved. But when I look at what Monty Williams is trying to do, I just think he's trying all kinds of different lineups, trying to find something that works. But he needs to stick with what showed promise at the end of the season. I want to see Asar Thompson in the starting lineup. I want to see him being allowed to go all over the place and make the hustle plays, get offensive rebounds. I mean, other than shooting, I feel like he can do everything on the court. And he was an early, sneaky rookie of the year pick because of his production. Jaden Ivey's development has kind of been pushed to the side now that Monty Williams wants to focus on defense and he's playing Killian Hayes a lot more minutes. And obviously, like you said, Bojan Bogdanovic only playing 3 games doesn't help because right now they really need 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
But it's not a pretty sight right now. It's never a pretty sight to be mentioned with the 2012 Bobcats, who are literally a meme in the NBA world right now.
Yeah.
It's insane. But yeah, I think Monty Williams, he's in very unfamiliar territory. He's been with the Phoenix Suns team where he took over in 2019 when they actually started winning games with Devin Booker, finally. And he really only saw success from there. Even though he didn't win a ring, he made the finals, like you said. He had some really talented guys on that team, but it's just crazy. I mean, do you think there's any trade that they can make, any lineup change they can make that could possibly get them back on track?
I mean, like you mentioned, playing Ivy and Thompson more, I think, yeah, that would help. But I think ultimately, like, in this modern NBA, you need spacing, and they simply just do not have enough shooting to get that job done. I mean, if you're relying on Alec Burks and Isaiah Stewart as your floor spacers, for a guy like Cade Cunningham, who is their primary ball handler, and like, his development is getting absolutely wrecked, not just by injury, but by coaching, and obviously this winless stretch rather is not helping him.
Yeah. Also, there was a report. I don't know if it was true. It was just strictly a report, nothing confirmed. But Bogdanovich, so a team offered 3 first-round picks for him last year at the trade deadline,
and they didn't take it. I mean, so I mean, I think a lot of that can fall on ownership. Tom Gores, I know a lot of Pistons fans have been very unhappy with him. Troy Weaver, the GM, making a lot of moves, but none of them really substantiating toward any sort of like productive, meaningful basketball. Like, I can understand losing, but when there's no top prospect to tank for really, or really any development that you're getting for your young guys, just because your coach refuses to play them, like, what's the point of just repeatedly punching your fans in the face? Essentially, it's hard to imagine. And like you mentioned earlier, reports with Bojan, I know that this season they're looking at maybe Tobias Harris being brought back to Detroit as a veteran leader. And like, I'm not even sure what the trade package would be if that happens, and if that would even help them really. I don't know, man. It's a disaster.
It's definitely going to take a lot. And I mean, with them being 2-25 on the season, there is one other team that really we can only compare, and that's the Washington Wizards, sitting at 4-21 on the year. Jordan Poole's stats have dropped completely below what we saw for him the last 2 years with the Golden State Warriors. I mean, do you think the expectations were a little too heavy on him heading into the season with everybody touting him as the guy of the franchise? And potentially being a most improved candidate?
I mean, I think people's expectations of him were a bit too high. I mean, he did come off of scoring like 22, 23 with the Warriors in that system. High movement, very, fast, rapid pace, a lot of ball movement in there, Steve Kerr motion offense. And, you go basically a 1-for-1 swap for Chris Paul. I think some of these expectations may be a tad too high. I think we all knew that, they were hitting the reset button when they traded Bradley Beal and Porzingis earlier this offseason to some contenders. But, it's kind of shocking to see, these like lowlights every single night from him. And, whether that's fair or not from the media sort of dunking on him, it's a little bit hard to watch, I will say. Just sort of a lack of structure, kind of like the Pistons, where they're kind of just doing whatever out there. Not many bright spots in Washington other than, maybe Bilal Coulibaly, the rookie, Wemby's teammate, drafted in the top 10. He's shown some very good defensive promise and pretty good shooting efficiency lately. But, yeah, not much in the nation's capital, especially, with like recent reports that they're actually going to be moving out of DC down to Virginia too. So, yeah, I mean, not all cherry blossoms out in DC, apparently.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the money when you say no structure. You go from playing with two of the greatest shooters in the history of the game. You have seasoned veterans, whether or not he got hit by Draymond, that's still someone who has plenty of championship experience. One of the biggest competitors in the league right now. You have Kevon Looney, who, I mean, literally everybody in the NBA respects as a veteran, someone who has stuck around and done what he needs to do in order to win. And then you go to the Washington Wizards, who, like you said, their two main veterans, their two best players traded away to other contenders. I love me some Kyle Kuzma, former Laker right there. I'm always going to appreciate what he did for us. Won a championship with us. He was awesome his rookie year and sophomore year. But, I mean, when you have Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma as your two best players, those are dudes that have only been known for their offense, haven't always been the most efficient. I think Kyle Kuzma needs to be on a team where he's the third or fourth option at best in order to actually win. I would have loved for him to have been traded to the Phoenix Suns before that KD trade went down. I think he really would have thrived in that system. But they're allowing the most points per game to opposing teams in the entire league at 126 per game. And even at home games, they're allowing 128 points. So they're letting people come into their house and just, put up career highs. It's like shooting practice out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, like the big man rotation isn't great. You got Daniel Gafford in there, who's been solid, but I know that KD put him on another highlight the other night.
Yep.
I don't know what KD has against him. Like maybe he just loves coming back to DC and victimizing
his
their own players. Yeah, but I mean, they made the move to like have a reset. Unlike Detroit, where they did draft like relatively kind. They haven't hit on their draft picks. At least Bilal and Denny have some promise. At least, especially on the defensive end.
Yep.
Corey Kispert's another guy. Gonzaga guy. Decent 3-point shooter. I know that Johnny Davis hasn't really panned out for them, unfortunately, as a top 10 pick. But you're looking at another year in the lottery, and for them, they at least have their pieces together a little bit compared to Detroit. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they pick it up around midseason, and Jordan Poole and Kuzma can get their efficiency up a little bit, but we'll see what happens at the trade deadline too. I know that Kuzma just signed that extension, so teams might want, a guy that can put up 20 a night, decent passer. He's getting his passing chops up this year, for sure. But who knows? With the nation's capital, it's a lot of turmoil in a lot of aspects. So
we're definitely going to have to see, but kind of taking another 180 again, we're going to look at the best team in the NBA right now, record-wise. That is none other than the Minnesota Timberwolves. Did you see that coming, Caleb? Did you see that coming?
And, for all the talk of, that big Rudy Gobert trade, like being near the worst trade ever with like 7 picks going the other way, you ship out a bunch of depth pieces, including someone who was comparable last year and Walker Kessler as a defender. People wondered, this too big lineup, like with all the spacing and what teams are trying to do nowadays, like would it really work? I think people forgot that the Denver Nuggets and multiple players from their championship team last year, they said that Minnesota gave them the toughest time. And I think that people are really starting to see that vision now in the record book. You got Rudy Gobert. He's much maligned on the offensive end. He's never going to be a floor spacer. He's going to be someone who gets put in the dunker and gets his lobs, decent layup finishes or putbacks. But on the defensive end, you cannot deny that this guy is all world. One of the best defenders that we've ever seen. And I think well on his way to being a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, along with Ben Wallace. So he's definitely found his form again. You got Anthony Edwards. Interesting situation off the court, but on the court, he's definitely taken a leap, putting up a lot of points, being a primary ball handler, getting his passing chops up too. Karl Anthony Towns, he was injured for most of last year. Kind of a messy year for Cat in 22, but this year he's really put it all together. As he said before that he's not. I thought this quote was really interesting. He's not necessarily the sun anymore, but he's one of the planets. And I think that sort of team-wide attitude, it's really reflected in, their 20-5 record, best in the West. And like another steady presence for them, Mike Conley, traded. Maybe he was a worse player than D'Angelo Russell. I'm not going to deny that at this point in his career. He's in his late 30s, but what he's done as a steady presence, not turning the ball over, getting his teammates involved, just a solid, steady point guard and someone who can organize the offense and play decently on defense too. I think they're just in a really good spot. And, I'll let you talk about like the rest of their depth and bench pieces, especially like what are your thoughts on maybe Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels? Who I didn't.
No, I was just about to jump into Naz Reid because when you have someone like Anthony Edwards, who is your franchise player now, who has a dog mentality, who's not scared of any other superstar in the NBA, you need to surround him with players who carry that same mentality, even if they don't have the same talent level. I think that's exactly what you have in Naz Reid. He has become such a versatile guy on both ends of the floor, just willing to do whatever it takes. Some nights he's only getting 10, 15 minutes. Other nights he's seen upwards of 30 minutes, depending on the matchups, depending on who's hot. But every time that I see him play, no matter how many minutes, no matter how many touches he's getting, he's coming in with the same energy. And that's exactly what you need for a team that was searching for identity last season. I mean, we saw Gobert get into it with Kyle Anderson last year in the playoffs. And I think we all just thought like, man, like what is this team going to become? You have a guy who essentially could be the face of the NBA at some point in Anthony Edwards. And this is all going on. It looks everybody thought Minnesota was doing something wrong, but they're ahead of the Denver Nuggets right now, the same team that knocked them out first round. Yeah. So you'd love to see it. I mean, McDaniels is awesome. McDaniels, same thing as Naz Reid. He brings that mentality, and he's their defensive stopper. He comes in the game, and he's matching up with the best perimeter guys. And I think, I'm a Laker fan, so we got Cam Reddish, we got Vando. I see that same willingness to pick people up full court and to die for loose balls and to get his guys the ball on the offensive side as much as I think that I see in Cam and Vando every time I watch the Lakers play. So I think what they have going is awesome right now. And Anthony Edwards, he is definitely in the MVP conversation right now. Like you said, Gobert, he's on his way to a historical Defensive Player of the Year run. It's crazy. I mean, everybody was saying that he wasn't the same defender anymore. He's like, he kept the receipts. He did what he needed to do. He played for his country. I think whenever you go play for your country most of the time, you come back somehow better. It's crazy. Like that's what I
think you're seeing the same thing with Dennis Schroeder in Toronto and Franz Wagner for Germany, especially. And
Laurie with the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, like all those guys take a certain amount of pride for sure. I know that Nikhil Alexander-Walker, he was another piece of that Canada team, semifinalist in the FIBA tournament.
Dylan Brooks.
Dylan Brooks as well. He's definitely a character. He got his revenge game in Memphis. So shout out Dylan Brooks.
Shout out Dylan the villain. That dude. But that's gonna do it for today, yo. I mean, I had a lot of fun wrapping up the good, the bad, and the ugly in the NBA right now. I mean, no matter what, we're basketball heads at the end of the day. We're gonna tune in, even if the Detroit Pistons don't win a game the rest of the season. Where there's guys in there that we like watching. We're always gonna be tapped in with the latest news. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, follow my man Caleb at the Win Column on Instagram. He's gonna get real active on there soon. You guys can follow me at Noel. Caleb, anything you want to say to the people before we head off?
Yeah, just follow me at the Win Column. Gonna have a lot of like sports related stuff coming out there, and follow my boy Noel. He's been doing some really good stuff out there. Some nice reels on Instagram, and we'll catch you guys next time.
I appreciate that, my man. You guys have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you next week.